Dana, first of all, let me just respond to a couple of things that you said, but I want to start with something you said, which I think is frankly disgusting and is more appropriate for a Democratic propagandist than it is for an American journalist. There is nothing that I have said that has led to threats against these hospitals. These hospitals, the bomb threats and so forth, it's disgusting. The violence is disgusting. We condemn it. We condemn all violence.
Senator, this happened after you and President Trump were on the debate stage, said that cats and dogs were being eaten.
You asked a question, Dana, and I'm going to go ahead and answer it. What we have said is that this town has suffered terribly under the policies of Kamala Harris. Now, you just accused me of inciting violence against the community when all that I've done is surface the complaints of my constituents, people who are suffering because of Kamala Harris's policies. Are we not allowed to talk about these problems because some psychopaths are threatening violence? We can condemn the violence on the one hand, but also talk about the terrible consequences of Kamala Harris's open border on the other hand. Now, let me just fact check a couple of other things that you said, Dana, because it's important. You said that all of these migrants are in the country legally. They are in the country through what's called temporary protective status.
Right.
That is when Kamala Harris waved a magic amnesty wand, taking people and giving them legal status. That is not to say that they're here legally. That is a terrible indictment of her amnesty policies that have further opened the border and further caused terrible migration into this country. First of all, I have heard firsthand from multiple constituents, people who made 911 calls a month ago, a year ago, who were making these complaints. I trust my constituents more than I do the American media that has shown no interest in what's happened in Springfield until we started sharing cat memes on the internet, which is disgraceful that the American media ignored this town. And that's the most important part.
You represent Ohio here in Washington, and your state's governor is asking for federal help to deal with the influx of about 15,000 migrants over the past 4 years, which has strained the health system, he says, schools, caused safety issues. You've been talking about these problems, but what have you done to help Governor DeWine with his request for federal help?
Well, the most important thing that we can do to assist Governor DeWine and the whole state of Ohio, and frankly the whole country, Margaret, is to stop Kamala Harris's open border. And for 2 years, I've been fighting for policies that do exactly that. You have to ask yourself, why have these 20,000 Haitian migrants been dropped into a small Ohio town in just a few years, Margaret? And the answer is because Kamala Harris implemented what's called temporary protective service for over 100,000 Haitian migrants. She basically, with a magic wand, granted amnesty to thousands of people who shouldn't have been in this country, and now a small Ohio town is dealing with the consequences. And to anybody listening, Margaret, this is what Kamala Harris wants to do to every town in this country. Overwhelm them with migration, stress their municipal budgets, see communicable diseases on the rise. What is happening in Springfield is coming to every town and city in this country. If Kamala Harris's open border policies are allowed to continue, we have got to stop this. American citizens are suffering because of what she's done. And
it's cheaper to manufacture overseas, which is why so many companies do it. But that's another issue. Just to follow up on the promise you're making to working class voters, you are now saying no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on income from Social Security. All of that would wipe out a big chunk of the tax base. Do you really think that fiscally conservative Republicans in Congress are going to vote for this?
Well, I think obviously Republicans believe American workers should keep more of their own money. And yes, I think that if we actually balance this out by penalizing some of these companies for manufacturing overseas, I do think that we can get this to balance out in the right way, Margaret, where we're not blowing a hole in the deficit. We're giving workers more of their money. But to your point, we're actually making it easier to make things in the United States of America. Now, you're exactly right. Sometimes it is a little bit cheaper to manufacture overseas, but we have to ask why that is. It's because a lot of these foreign countries use literal slave labor in manufacturing. We should not be allowing slave laborers to benefit from American markets. If you want access to our market, you've got to pay our workers fair wages. That is the Trump agenda, and it's something he already implemented once, by the way, Margaret, but is going to double down on in his second term. Dana, would you like to ask me questions and then let me answer them, or would you like to debate me on these topics? I noticed that when you had Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, You gave them multiple choice answers to the questions that you asked, and you allowed them to answer the questions. I'm happy to be here to talk about policy, but if you're going to interrupt me every single time that I open my mouth, then why am I even doing this? So please ask a question, and I'd ask you to be polite enough to let me answer it.
Yes, I am, and I think that
Dana, first